Hello everyone, I'm Arya from Susan's family. Today, I'll teach you how to make the Furong patchwork handbag from the Chinese aesthetics series. The electronic pattern for this product can be found on our website. Search for en.sussudiy.com to access it. This bag consists of the motifs, the side pieces, the handles, the shrimp stitches and the assembly. First, crochet each part separately, then assemble them. First, let's learn how to crochet the motif. We need to crochet two identical motifs. Both begin with the magic ring. Crochet in rounds counterclockwise. Color change is required during the process. Several stitches will be used, and they are all indicated on the pattern. I won't go through them one by one. Please watch as I demonstrate the specific crochet method. First, begin with the magic ring using the corresponding color yarn. Here, I'm demonstrating with random colors. For specific yarn details, color schemes and crochet hook size, please refer to the product's detail page and the paper pattern. After completing the magic ring, begin to work round 1. Chain 3 to begin. Count them as a double crochet, then work 15 double crochets into the magic ring. Cause there are large number of stitches, you can move them to the right as you crochet. After that, close the magic ring. Slip stitch into the third chain of the beginning chain. The beginning chain might not be very visible here. This is the double crochet to the left of the beginning chain. Work slip stitch into 2 strands of this left chain. The solid dot indicates that the slip stitch needs to be tightened, and the slip stitch doesn't count as one stitch. Then fasten off the yarn. That concludes round 1. Move on to round 2. Take the corresponding color of yarn. Join the yarn in the left double crochet of the beginning chain. Chain 3 to begin. These 3 chains count as a double crochet. Then work 4 double crochets into the same stitch. Place the yarn ends above the hook. Weave them in as you crochet. After completing, including the beginning chain, there are 5 double crochets. Next, slightly enlarge the loop. Remove the hook. Hook into 2 strands of this chain from the beginning chain. Draw the loop through. Work 1 chain to secure. We consider this is a special DC5 popcorn. Chain 3. Skip 1 stitch below. Work a DC5 popcorn into the second stitch on the left. That means work 5 double crochets into this stitch first. Then draw the loop through the first double crochet. Chain 1 more to secure. That is a DC5 popcorn. For the rest of this round, always skip 1 stitch below and work a DC5 popcorn. Knot includes the chain for security. Work 3 more chains for transition. Follow this pattern to complete this round. When done, at this beginning popcorn, roughly pick up 2 strands and join with a slip stitch. Then break the yarn. You can weave in this yarn end along the back loops. The back loop is the farther strand of the chain or stitch. That concludes round 2. Move on to round 3. First, join the yarn in any chain space. Chain 1 as the beginning chain for single crochet. But the chain doesn't count as a single crochet, then, work 2 single crochets into this chain space. Then work 2 single crochets into the left chain space. Chain 7. Continue with another 2 single crochets into the same chain space. Work 3 single crochets into the left chain space. Continue to crochet these 2 group of stitches, alternately into the left chain spaces. Not include these stitches at the beginning chain space. Finally, work 1 more single crochet into this chain space. Then slip stitch into the first single crochet to join and don't break the yarn. Round 3 is complete. Move on to round 4. Chain 1 to begin. Into the same placement of the previous slip stitch, which is this middle single crochet. Work a single crochet here. Chain 1. Then work 7 treble crochets into the left chain space. The treble crochet means to yarn over twice to work. After that, work a CH3 picket. First, chain 3. Then slip stitch into the front loop, and 1 left strand of the stitch. This is the CH3 picket. Continue with another 7 treble crochets into the same chain space. After that, chain 1. Next, repeat the stitches between this single crochet and this chain. I'll demonstrate one more group. Always work this single crochet into the middle one of these 3 single crochets. Chain 1. First, work 7 treble crochets into this chain space. After that, crochet a CH3 picot. Continue with 7 treble crochets. Chain 1. Another group of stitches is complete. Next, follow this pattern to complete this round. When completing, join with a slip stitch in the first single crochet and break the yarn. That concludes round 4. Move on to round 5. First, find the 3rd treble crochet of the final group from the previous round. Join the yarn at 1 or 2 back strands of this stitch. Chain 1 to begin. Work a single crochet into the joining placement. Chain 3. Then into this single crochet below, work 1 double crochet. Three chains. And another double crochet. Chain 3 more. Then find the 3rd to last treble crochet of these stitches. Also work a single crochet into 1 or 2 back strands of the stitch. So these 2 single crochets are symmetrical. Chain 3. Next, repeat the stitches between this single crochet to these 3 chains. After completing this final single crochet, work 2 chains. Then work a single crochet into this beginning single crochet. That concludes round 5. Move on to round 6. Chain 3 to begin. Chain 2 more. Or say that begin with 5 chains. Then, into the left chain space, work 1 double crochet. One chain. And another double crochet. Chain 1 more. After that, work 3 double crochets into the left chain space. Continue with 3 chains and another double crochets into the same chain space. Chain 1 more. Into the left chain space, work a double crochet. A chain and another double crochet. Chain 2 more. Continue working into the left chain space with a double crochet. 3 chains and another double crochet. Chain 2. Excepting the 5 chains at the beginning. Repeat these stitches we have just worked. Finally, work a double crochet into this chain space. Chain 3. Then slip stitch into 2 strands of the third chain and break the yarn. That concludes round 6. Move on to round 7. First, hook into this hole of the picket from round 4. Also hook into this back chain space made of 3 chains. Join the yarn here. Chain 4 to begin. Them count as a treble crochet. Then work 4 treble crochets into the same placement. Then draw the loop from this top chain. Chain 1 to secure. We consider this as a specialty R5 popcorn. Chain 3. Work 2 double crochets into the left chain space. Work a double crochet into this second chain space. Chain 1 after each double crochet. After that, work a single crochet into the first stitch of these 3 stitches. Chain 3. Slip stitch into this chain space. The oval solid dot indicates the slip stitch without tightening. With this slip stitch as the center, work the previous stitches symmetrically. Work all the way until the 3 chains. After that, repeat these stitches in this group. For the following popcorn, work 5 treble crochets first. Then draw the loop through the first stitch and chain 1 to secure. Continue to complete this round. Note, the number of chains afterward does not include the chain to secure the popcorn. After that, slip stitch into the stitch of the beginning popcorn stitch, and break the yarn. That concludes round 7. Move on to round 8. First, pick up several strands to join the yarn at the first popcorn. Chain 3 to begin. Work a double crochet into the same placement. Chain 1. Then work 2 double crochets into each of the left 3 chain spaces. Work a double crochet into the 4th chain space. After that, chain 1. Work a single crochet into the left chain space. Chain 3. Then work the previous stitches symmetrically. Work all the way until complete the 7 double crochets. Then chain 1 into several strands of this popcorn. Work 2 double crochets. Three chains and another 2 double crochets. Next, starting from this chain, repeat this group of stitches. Finally, into the joining placement, work 2 more double crochets. Chain 1. Then pick up 2 strands at the top of the beginning chain. Work a half double crochet here. After completing, don't break the yarn. That concludes round 8. Move on to round 9. Chain 3 to begin. Work a double crochet into the chain space. Chain 1. Work 2 double crochets into the left chain spaces. Then into the 2nd, 4th and 6th stitch on the left side. Work 2 double crochets into each of them. After that, work a double crochet into the left chain space. Chain 3. Then work the previous stitches symmetrically. Work all the way until complete the 9th double crochet. After that, chain 1. Then work the corner chain space with 2 double crochets. 3 chains and another 2 double crochets. Starting from this chain, repeat this group of stitches. Finally, into this beginning chain space, work 2 double crochets and 3 chains. Then slip stitch into the beginning chain, and fasten off the yarn. That concludes round 9. Continue with round 10. First, join the yarn at this corner. Chain 3 to begin. Work 2 more double crochets into the same chain space. Chain 1. Work 2 double crochets into the left chain space. Chain 1 after each double crochet. Once completed, work a back post double crochet into this third double crochet. The crochet method is same to the regular double crochet, just differ in the working placement. So hook through the back of this double crochet like this. Then hook into the left stitch. Complete the double crochet. Continue working 6 back post double crochets correspondingly. Always hook through the back of the current stitch. Then hook into the left stitch to complete the double crochet. Here just hook into the left chain space, and complete the double crochet. Once completed, work a double crochet into this chain space. Then hook into the chain spaces from round 6 and round 7 at the same time. Work a TR5 popcorn here. Note: here don't work into the chain space of round 8. Once completed, continue working a double crochet into this chain space from round 9. Then, into these 7 double crochets. Work a back post double crochet into each of them. After completing, chain 1. Then work 2 double crochets into the left chain space. Chain 1 after each double crochet. Every time we reach the corner chain space, always work 3 double crochets, 3 chains and another 3 double crochets into them. Next, starting from this chain, repeat this group of stitches. Complete the remaining part on your own. Now, round 10 is completed. Move on to round 11. Take the corresponding color of yarn. First, work a back post double crochet into the beginning chain. Yarn over once. Hold the yarn tail with your right hand. Come out through this chain space. Hook into the left stitch of the beginning chain. Draw the yarn through. Yarn over, draw the yarn through these 2 loops. Yarn over again and pull through. Here we complete a back post double crochet. Then chain 1. Into the left 2 double crochets. Work a back post double crochet in each. Chain 1 in between. After that, chain 2. Work a DC5 popcorn into this chain space. Chain 2. Then, into these stitches. Work back post double crochets correspondingly. Here the stitch of this popcorn might not be very clear. Just insert the hook roughly like this and crochet. After that, chain 2. Work a DC5 popcorn into this chain space. Chain 2. At this corner, into these 6 double crochets, work a back post double crochet into each of them, and work the required number of chains between them. Next, starting form these 2 chains. Repeat this group of stitches. Complete this round. Note: when finishing the last back post double crochet, chain 1. Then work a half double crochet into several strands of this beginning BPDC. Note: for different color schemes, we break the yarn at the different placement. If you need to break the yarn, join the new color yarn for the next round and continue working. If there is no need to break the yarn, just continue to crochet the next round. Here I won't break the yarn. That concludes round 11. Move on to round 12. Work double crochets into each chain space correspondingly, and work chains into the required placement. Into the stitches of these middle BPDC, work a BPDC into each of them. At the corners of round 13, work the required BPDC and chains. Here work a DC5 popcorn into the chain space. Into the middle 3 stitches of this 5 stitch. Work a BPDC into each. Work chains at the required placement. Into these BPDC, and the 2 double crochets on each side. Work double crochets correspondingly. In the corners of round 14, work the required treble crochets and chains. Work double crochets into other placements. If the stitches is points to the chain, just work the stitches into the corresponding chain space. Work other stitches into the corresponding stitches. For the stitch of the popcorn, pick up several strands at the top to work. After completing round 14, you can measure the size of the fabric. Here I'll demonstrate with this sample. When measuring, extend the fabric as much as possible. Compare it with the dimensions given in the pattern. Make sure the fabric does not exceed the size given in the pattern, to ensure the grid board is enough. If it extends too much, you can adjust your crochet tension, and re-crochet the last few rounds. First, trim the grid board. The number of squares to trim is already provided in the pattern. First, along the long edge to trim the grid board for the front and back pieces. Be careful not to miscount the squares. Trim the edges smoothly. Then, use the same method to trim another identical grid board. Compare the grid board with the first 14 rounds of the front and back motifs. When the fabric is stretched. If the final round still doesn't reach the size of the grid board, you may need to trim the grid board a little bit more based on the actual fabric. Just make sure the fabric is not too tight or too loose when be stretched. Next, on the remaining grid board, trim a grid board corresponding to the bottom piece. Make sure the length of the long edge is same to the front and back pieces. No grid board is needed for the 2 side pieces. After trimming the grid boards, let's crochet round 15. Work single crochets correspondingly for this round. Here, I'll use this sample to demonstrate. Place the motif overlapping the grid board. Make sure the smoother side of the grid board faces outward. Place the motif with the right side, facing up on the grid board. Match the corners. You can secure the corners with stitch markers. If you don't have stitch markers, you can substitute them with paper clips or safety pins. Place the motif facing ourselves. Start crocheting. Join the yarn in any corner chain space. Chain 1 to begin. Work a single crochet into the same chain space. Then work single crochets evenly. Hook through the whole of the grid board as crocheting. One hole corresponds to one stitch. If the number of the holes can't match the stitches, just roughly work into the corresponding hole. Just ensure that the fabric piece lays flat and looks neat. At the corners, work into the same chain space with 2 single crochets. Two chains. And another 2 single crochets. Complete this round on your own. Finally, at this corner, work 2 more single crochets. Two chains. And another single crochet. Then slip stitch and fasten off the yarn. That concludes our tutorial for the motif. Follow the same method to complete the other one. Join the grid board when crocheting the final round. Next, let's learn about the side pieces. Let's look at the finished product. There are 3 side pieces. All begin with the foundation chains. Work double crochets back and forth. Finally, work 1 round of single crochets around the fabric. Please watch my demonstration of the specific crochet method. First, work the required number of chains. Then in the final chain, pick up these 2 strands and place a stitch marker. Then chain 3 as the turning chain. The turning chain count as a double crochet. Like before. Place a stitch marker on the third chain. Then skip the marked chain. Move to the left chain. Work a double crochet into its top loop. Continue work into the top loops of the remaining chains with double crochets. Complete this row. Row 1 is complete. Move on to row 2. Chain 3 to begin. Place the stitch marker. Turn the fabric. These 3 chains count as one double crochet and correspond to the last stitch of row 1. Continue working double crochets evenly. Note that when crocheting on the wrong side, the stitches are on the upper left. Finally, work a double crochet into this marked stitch. That completes row 2. After crocheting, you can compare it with the grid board. Lay the fabric piece flat. The width should match the grid board. If the size differs significantly, you can adjust your crochet tension and crochet again. Follow the pattern to complete the remaining rows on your own. Compare it with the grid board as you crochet. Stretch out the fabric flat. Compare it with the grid board dimensions. Keep them consistent. After completing the last row, don't break the yarn. Continue to crochet a round of single crochets. For the 3 side pieces, 2 of them are crocheted normally. One of them need to join the grid board while crocheting. Chain 1 to begin. Turn the fabric. Take out the pre-cut grid board for the base piece. Match and secure the 3 corners with the fabric. Hook through the stitch from the fabric. Also hook into the hole of the grid board. Complete the single crochet. Continue working single crochets evenly. Cause the number of holes might not match with the stitches, just roughly hook into the corresponding hole as crocheting. Continue to complete this row. Into this final stitch and its corresponding hole. Work 3 single crochets. When crocheting the side, if there is the turning chain, pick up the entire braid and work 2 single crochets. The turning chain corresponding to 2 holes. If there is a double crochet, pick up the entire double crochet and work 2 single crochets. A double crochet also correspond to 2 holes. Follow this method to crochet this side. At this corner, hook into the remaining 2 strands of this chain and the corresponding hole. Work 3 single crochets here. Next, into the remaining 2 strands of each chain and the corresponding hole. Work single crochets evenly. The crochet method is similar to the opposite side. At this corner, work 3 single crochets into this marked placement. For this side, the crochet method is similar to the opposite side. Just follow the pattern to complete the remaining part on your own. Finally, at the stitch of the first single crochet, work 2 more single crochets. After that, join with a slip stitch and break the yarn. Weave in all the yarn ends. The round of single crochets will be the right side of the fabric. For the other 2 side pieces, crochet using the method demonstrated earlier. When crocheting the final round of single crochets, there's no need to add the grid board. Check the fabric size as you crocheting. Make sure it matches the height of the motif. That concludes our tutorial for the side pieces. Next, we'll crochet the handles. There are 2 identical pieces needed. Begin with the foundation chains. Then crochet in rounds counterclockwise. I'll demonstrate with this sample. My demonstration is mainly for the sewing method. First, complete the required number of chains. Refer to the pattern for the specific number. The number of stitches for the sample is random. Place a stitch marker on the last chain. After completing the foundation chain, start round 1. Chain 1 to begin. At the marked chain, work a single crochet into its top loop. Continue working single crochets evenly into the top loop of each chain. Keep going until you have one chain left. When you reach the corresponding placement, now there's only one chain left. Here, work 3 single crochets. Then turn the fabric. You can see on this side, there are still 2 strands of chains. Continue working into these 2 strands of the chains. Actually, that is the same working placement of the stitches before. Note that don't work into the same placement of these 3 single crochets here. Complete the remaining stitches on your own. Finally, work 2 single crochets at the marked chain. After completing, check the number of stitches. Join with a slip stitch in the first single crochet. Pull tight. That completes round 1. Treat the side with a clearer texture as the right side. For round 2 and round 3, work single crochets evenly into each stitch in the middle. Increase stitches at both ends. After completing round 3, join with a slip stitch and break the yarn, and weave in the yarn tails. Follow the pattern to complete this part on your own. This completes one handle. Crochet the other handle using the same method. Then move on to the shrimp stitch for strap. Take the corresponding yarn. Note that the shrimp stitch requires 2 strands of yarn. Combine them and crochet as one. You can take yarn from the center and the outer of the yarn ball meantime. Combine them and crochet as one. To make it clear to see, the demonstration uses 1 strand of yarn. When we say 1 strand later, it actually refers to 2 strands. Let's begin. At the first, leave a yarn tail of about 20 centimeters for sewing. Chain 2. Hook into the top loop of the first chain. Yarn over and draw the yarn through. Yarn over again, and draw through. 1 single crochet is completed. Then turn the fabric clockwise. You can see these 2 strands below. Pick them up slightly looser. Hook into these 2 strands. Work 1 single crochet here. Yarn over and draw the yarn through. Yarn over again, and draw through. Turn the fabric clockwise. There are 2 strands on the left side like these. Work a single crochet into these 2 strands. Turn the fabric again. Work a single crochet into these 2 strands. Continue crocheting. Once completed, let's take a look. For the following crochet pattern, every time turn the fabric. Work a single crochet into 2 strands like before. Follow this method to continue. Crochet until you reach the desired length. You can refer to the pattern for the specific length, or adjust it as needed. After reaching the desired length, chain 1 to secure. Enlarge the loop. Leave about 20 centimeters of yarn before breaking the yarn. Tighten it. That completes our tutorial for the shrimp stitch. Next, let's learn about assembly. Here's the finished product. For assembly, we need to sew the front and back pieces, the base piece, the handles, the lining fabric, the magnetic clasps, the D-rings, the strap and the side pieces. The sample here mainly demonstrates the sewing method. The design and size of the fabric are not for reference. Please watch the demonstration. First, sew together the front and back pieces, and the base piece. Take out 2 motifs and the side piece with the grid board. Place them with their right side facing up. The side piece is in the middle. Motifs on either side of the long edge of the side piece. Sew adjacent sides together. Leave the other 2 sides unsewn for now. Cut a yarn tail 3 times the length of the motif. Thread it onto a sewing needle. For the sample, the colors are random, sew one side first. Pick up these 2 fabrics with their wrong sides facing each other. From this single crochet at this corner to the left chain of the motif. Pick up the nearby half loop and whip stitch to sew them together. To make it more secure, you can sew an extra time here. Sew with moderate tension. Not too tight or too loose. When the number of stitches of two fabric can't match up, you can adjust as you sew. That's it, on the side with fewer stitches. Sew twice through one stitch. And sew normally on the other side. For example, if there are fewer stitches on this side, you can sew an extra time at this stitch. Just make sure the fabric piece is flat and neat. Continue sewing until you reach the middle single crochet on the left corner. You can sew an extra time on the last stitch. Then tie off and weave in the ends on the wrong side. One side is now sewn on. Sew the other side using the same method. This part of the fabrics are now sewn on. Next, let's sew on the handles. Let's take a look at the finished product first. Both ends of the handle are sewn onto round 9 of the motif. The sewing height is about 2 centimeters. You can also adjust the exact placement according to your preference. Now I'll demonstrate the sewing method using this sample. Take out one handle. Place the right side of the fabric facing up. Cut a yarn tail about 3 times the length of the handle. Thread it through the sewing needle. Start from one end of the handle. And sew along the single crochets. Sew to a height of about 2 centimeters. Once this end is sewn, fold the handle in half with the wrong side facing each other. Pick up the nearest half loop to sew together with whip stitches. Continue sewing all the way to the other end. Leave about 2 centimeters remaining. When you reach the corresponding placement, secure this end of the handle in place. Then sew along the edge stitches using a similar method. When done, tie off the yarn tail on the wrong side and secure it. The handle for one side is now attached. Attach the other handle with the same method. Up to this point, our tutorial for the handle attachment is complete. Now let's move on to cutting and sewing the lining. First, let's cut the lining fabric. Lay the lining fabric with the wrong side up and smooth it out. Take out the fabric we have sewn, and lay it flat on the lining. Place it close to the edge so that make sure there's enough lining fabric. Leave a width of about 0.5 centimeter. Draw the outline with a pen. Then, cut about 0.5 centimeters away from the edge along the outline. The lining fabric is now cut. Next, sew the lining fabric. Place the grid board facing the wrong side of the lining. Make sure the shapes are centered and correspond. To make sewing easier, you can roughly secure it with some sewing thread. When securing, make sure the lining fabric is laid flat without any wrinkles. Mind not to secure it at the edges. so as not to affect the later sewing of the lining. I've already secured it in advance here. Take another piece of sewing thread. Thread into the needle. Fold it in half, and tie off the end. Start sewing at any placement. First, fold the edge of the lining to the wrong side. Make sure the lining fits the grid board. The folded edge of the lining should be perfectly aligned with the grid board. If you want the lining to fit more closely, you can pull it slightly tighter. But don't make it too tight. First, secure the thread on the fabric. After folding the lining, make sure to press it securely in place. Sew along the folded edge once. Then gently pull to tighten. Insert into the fabric. Pick up strands, and sew. Pull tight. Continue sewing through both the lining and the fabric. Sew the lines shorter, or say that sew a bit more densely. Try not to show too much marks of the sewing. When you reach the corner, fold the lining to match the shape of the grid board and continue sewing. Make sure the lining is flat at the corner. Continue sewing in this way. If you run out of thread halfway, tie off and weave in the tail on the fabric. Then take another thread and continue sewing. Weave in the yarn end inside the fabric. Then continue sewing. Remember, when you reach a corner, fold the lining flat and then sew it. Continue to complete sewing on your own. After sewing everything, weave in all the yarn tails. Now we can remove the threads we have used to secure. The lining is now sewn on. Next, sew on the magnetic clasps. It consists of the female part and male part. First, sew on the female part. Use the same thread as for the lining. Place the female part on the lining of any motif. Place it in a centered placement about 0.5 cm away from the top edge. Make sure it's not skewed. The side with the dent should face up. Sew through the 4 holes horizontally. Be mindful to sew within the fabric. Secure the grid board in place while sewing. Secure it firmly, then tie off, and weave in the ends. The female part is now attached. Use the same method to sew the male part on the other side symmetrically. Make sure to place it centered and matched up. Please complete it on your own. The strap consists of shrimp stitches, the lobster clasp, and the D-rings. First, use the reserved yarn to attach the lobster clasp at both ends of the shrimp stitches. There's no specific method required, just make sure it's secure. Using the reserved yarn tails, thread them onto a sewing needle. Then come out through the ring of the lobster clasp. Then pass it through the shrimp stitches. For extra security, you can thread it several more times. Then, weave in the ends. Attach the other lobster clasp using the same method. Once the lobster clasps are attached, start sewing on the D-rings. Place them approximately 1 to 2 centimeters above the motif, and about 1 centimeter away from the edge on the left side. Take out the corresponding yarn, and thread it onto a sewing needle. I've already prepared here. There's no specific sewing method required, just make sure it's secure. When sewing, be mindful to sew inside the fabric. Weave in the yarn tail inside the fabric, so that keep the appearance of the fabric. One D-ring is now sewn on. Take out the strap. Open the lobster clasp and attach it directly to the D-ring. Complete the other D-ring in the same way. The strap is now assembled. There are 2 remaining side pieces. Place the fabric with the right side facing up. Sew the long sides to the sides of the motifs. And sew one short side of them to the base piece. Also use whip stitch to sew through the nearby half loops. The sewing method is similar to that used before. Mind there should be no holes where the 3 pieces meet. That concludes our tutorial for the sewing of the side pieces. At the same time, the tutorial for this bag is complete. During the process, if you encounter any unclear points, don't hesitate to reach out to our customer service. Susan's family is here for you, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you for watching. See you next time.